Hi, I'm Amy Cornell. I'm your Texas broker for Front Real Estate, and I'm here to help you real estate better. So I got an awesome text from one of my agents today that had a question about the HOA addendum and said, hey, do you have a video about it? I said, I don't have one yet. Let me record one. So I wanted to pop over and show you the HOA addendum and really walk through some of the best practices to make sure that your clients are protected. So let me pop into that form. So this is the TREC Form for, and they call it the Addendum for Property Subject to Mandatory Membership in a Property Owners Association, not for use with condominiums, addendum to the contract concerning the property at blank. Okay, so let's break that down a little bit. First off, mandatory. I had a call this weekend saying, well, what do I do for voluntary? Don't use this form. Okay, you don't need it. It's overkill. This is for a property owners association, which also could be a homeowners association. Really, that nomenclature is the same. But we're looking at a property owners association that has the right to foreclose a property if they don't pay their dues, to require changes to the property, or to mandate what kind of changes could be made to the property. That's what we're really talking about here. We're not talking about just a group that does, a Christmas party once a year and they have, a voluntary situation. We're looking at this is a mandatory thing and you have to participate in it if you live here, okay? Forever and always. This isn't something that is going away after a few years. It would have to be voted on by all the homeowners to disband the HOA and make a change from that going forward. So it is a big deal to be in an HOA. Especially a mandatory HOA. Now, why does it say not for use with condominiums? Well, that condo form, which is, remember, there's a whole nother form for condos, not the 1 to 4 family residential. But on the condo form, it's like a smush together of the 1 to 4 family contract and this HOA addendum all in one, because you really can't have a condo with not having a property owners association. So you're going to see this mush where it really is all the same. So don't use this form if you're doing a condo. Okay, so this is for these properties that have these HOAs, and we've got to make sure that the buyer is comfortable with what they know about it. So TREC is going to say, hey, you can get some information about it, and that's going to be the subdivision information. Now, I normally call this, instead of subdivision information, I call it the resale package, and it's because there is a lot of information that goes into it, but it's also more of a package for resale. So it's 2 parts. It says the subdivision information means, number 1, a current copy of the restrictions applying to the subdivision and the bylaws and rules of the association. Okay. Now, an owner might actually have those already, or they might have a website where they can go and see that, where that's the current information that they have. That's great. That doesn't mean that you don't still have to go and get part 2, which is part 2 is a resale certificate. And it says all of which are described by section 207.003 of the Texas Property Code. Okay, so that resale certificate is very important because it is really defining specific information about that property, really about that property at a certain time. So even if they had one from before when they bought, or maybe they had their property listed sometime last year and they're like, can't I just use that one again? No, they can't. I will tell you, resale certificates do have a little bit of shelf life. I would say normally 90 days. So if you have something that, they're looking to sell coming up, I tell them, hey, if we're getting close, really, I'd like you to go ahead and order that subdivision information before we list, if I'm representing the seller, sorry. So if I'm representing the seller, I want them to order it before I list, because when we list, I want to go ahead and have everything ready to go. The seller's disclosure, the survey NT47, and any HOA documentation for that resale package or subdivision information. Okay, I want to have all of that online. Why? Right? I want to have it all online so that the buyer can make the most informed decision, and that way then we're not all wasting time. We're not going under contract and then having the buyer get that documentation, review it, and say, oh, I didn't realize that I couldn't have a 6-foot wood fence, and I love wood fences. I really want that privacy. I'm going to opt out, right? Well, they might find out about that when they get the HOA documentation, We don't know when that might be because it may take the HOA a while to get that in. And so I just want it to be as clear as possible and everything done. However, I'll tell you, I see most properties that are listed without the HOA documentation up front. And I think it's for a couple of reasons. First off, what I'm saying is that timeline of the resale certificate. People are nervous because they don't want that resale certificate to expire. And so they're just like, you know what, we'll just wait until we go under contract, then get the resale certificate, then deliver that information to the buyer. They'll have a chance to review it. And then if all is good, then we'll go forward. And that is fine. That is what happens most of the time. But just know that the buyer has really an option out of the contract at any point before they get that information. Well, really up until 3 days after they get that information, because this section A1 says within blank days after the effective date of the contract, seller shall obtain, pay for, and deliver the subdivision information to buyer. Okay, we got that. Then if seller delivers the subdivision information, buyer may terminate this contract within 3 days after buyer receives the subdivision information or prior to closing, whichever occurs first, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Doesn't say, oh, if it says that the buyer can't paint their house blue, that they can opt out. No. If anything that they don't like in there, right? So if they were looking for an option out and you haven't delivered their HOA information yet, I mean, babe, you have given them a free option, right? So we want to make sure that we've tightened this up as much as possible. Now the seller is going to say, yeah, but okay, I'm having to pay for it. Yeah, you're having to pay for it. It says it very clear there that the seller pays for the subdivision information. Now there is there can be some that do not have a fee. Some of the HOAs that are self-run, they don't have a resale package fee. They don't have a subdivision information fee. But some of these professionally managed companies, they can have a fee up to like $500. And so the seller's like, yeah, but I don't want to pay that $500. I don't even know if this house is going to sell. I get it. I get that. But just know if you wait until after we're under contract, you're giving the buyer the out until you get that in. Well, how long does it take to get the subdivision information in? I don't know, right? It depends. Sometimes they will work with you and get it done pretty quickly. I will tell you more often it does take a while, especially if it is a professionally managed company, because they work at their own pace. And so for us, we see probably about 10 days from the time that they receive the money. That's when you'll get it in. Now, getting that money in and making sure that that's all done very quickly is helpful. What a lot of people do, though, is they rely on the title company to help them get this prepared, to go ahead and pull all this information from the HOA. And so then if the title company does that, and let's say it sat on the title company desk for a week before it got ordered, well, now instead of 10 days from when the money is there, it's 17. The other thing that if you're asking the title company to do this for you, they often will, but they're going to need some funding up front to pay for this resale package or the subdivision information. So the title company is going to need some money from the seller. The seller is going to need to deliver it to the title company. Then the title company requests it from the HOA, and the HOA gets it back to the title company, and the title company can get it to the buyer. It's just a lot of hands to go through. But if that's the way that y'all want to do it, totally fine. Just know that if the seller wants to order it before they go under contract, most of the time the HOA will work with them on an extension of that. So let's say that the resale certificate was good for 90 days and y'all end up being on the market for 60 days and then the closing is actually on day 95 or something. Well, a lot of times rather than paying another $500 for a resale package, it may be a $25 update fee or something like that. It's not nearly as expensive as buying two. Now, I can't guarantee it because every HOA is run different. Every HOA has their own rules. And so it is hard to know based on this form exactly what will happen with regards to the HOA. Hopefully the seller kind of has an idea about that because they should have been, at this point participating in the HOA for however long they own the home. And so they might know like, oh yeah, actually I know I've heard my neighbors kind of gripe about this, or I know that we are self-managed and I just need to get it over to Bill and he's going to get it for me. Okay, so they should kind of be able to manage this and walk through it. but it is very important to know that the buyer really has that free out. So how many days should you put in the section A1? Well, really, I don't think it matters a whole lot, because what does it say? If the seller delivers the subdivision information, buyer may terminate within 3 days after buyer receives subdivision information. I really don't even know why there is a number of days there, because it doesn't matter. Whenever the seller delivers it, then that's when the 3 days start. So if you want to put 10 days, if you wanted to put 20 days, if you want to put 30 days, honestly, I just don't know that it has a whole lot of effect. It's more of kind of acknowledging, hey, seller, take your time, get it to me whenever you want to get it to me. If you want it to be a shorter time period and like, hey, I'm planning on terminating if you don't get it to me by this date, then you could put in a shorter number of days in there. And then it would go to the second section of still A1 saying, if buyer does not receive the subdivision information, buyer, as buyer's sole remedy, may terminate the contract at any time prior to closing, and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Okay. All right. So I hope that helps in section 1. I'm going to scroll down to section 2, and that's within blank days after the effective date of the contract, buyer shall obtain, pay for, and deliver a copy of the subdivision information to the seller. I'll tell you, I just don't see this one used very much, but it is possible. Reason why I don't see it used very much is that's a lot to ask a buyer to go forward and pay for when they're just considering purchasing this home, right? They are contracting for it, but it's not what I would say customary to see the buyer have to pay for that up front. Number 3, buyer has received and approved the subdivision information before signing the contract, and then buyer either does or does not require an updated resale certificate. So this is what I like to have for my sellers, is I want to have number 3 checked with hopefully does not require an updated resale certificate, because ours is still good. So it's still within a number of timeline. If they require an updated, then it goes through what the plan is for that. The number 4 is buyer does not require delivery of subdivision information. That is possible. I will tell you that's going to be more of a cash purchaser, because anybody obtaining financing, normally the lender is going to need to see the details of the HOA, because that HOA will have some priority right over that mortgage company as well, especially if the mortgage company forecloses. All right. Then in bold, the title company or its agent is authorized to act on behalf of the parties to obtain the subdivision information only upon receipt of required fee for the subdivision information from the party obligated to pay. So that's what I was saying, is that the seller or buyer, if the number 2 is checked, has to actually pay the title company so that then they can pay the HOA. All right. Letter B, material changes. If seller becomes aware of any material change in the subdivision information, seller shall promptly give notice to buyer. Then buyer can terminate the contract. So that would be if, let's say that the gates all stopped working and the HOA had a vote that said, you know what, we're just not going to replace the gates. Well, that's a substantive change to the subdivision information, and that the buyer would need to know about. If, they just maybe changed who the water company is or something like that in the HOA, that may not be, if that's just for a common area deal, may not be substantive enough to require that change. So it really is more of a judgment call on there. All right, fees. Except as provided by paragraph A, D, and E, buyer shall pay any and all association fees and other charges associated with the transfer of the property, not to exceed blank, and the seller shall pay any excess. So it's a really weirdly written sentence, because it's basically saying, hey, the seller is going to pay for any transfer fees except for what the buyer is going to pay for, not the other way around. Because if that said 0, right, then the seller is going to pay for all of it. So however you want to do that is fine. I will say I customarily see $100 thrown in there. I think it's just kind of for good measure. Transfer fees, again, could be anywhere from 0 to about 500. I see most of the time it's in the 250 to 350 range. So, if you put 100 in there and it was 350, then the seller would pay 250 and the buyer would pay 100. However, the buyer wants to make their offer, that's totally fine. And then authorization. Seller authorizes the association to release and provide subdivision information and any updated resale certificate if requested by buyer, title company, or broker to the sale. If buyer does not require the subdivision information or updated resale certificate, and the title company requires from the association, then either the buyer or seller shall pay the title company the cost of obtaining the information prior to the title company ordering the information. So again, that would be if number 4 was used. Not going to see it happen that often, so I don't really see that section E coming into play very much either. And then really it's just signing, borrow a notice of buyer regarding repairs by the association. It basically, if you have any questions about repairs, you should get your answers before you close rather than after. So this has come up for some people. I had a townhome last year that the roof was supposed to be fixed by the HOA, and we weren't sure what company was going to be done, how the timeline was, who picked the colors, those kind of things. And so the buyer really had to do some due diligence to figure that out and get answers from the HOA directly before they were comfortable closing. Totally good. That's what this is saying, is that you really want to make sure that you're good with it. All right, and then buyer and seller sign. It goes over that, hey, this is a TREC promulgated form. And then, just make sure in the actual contract, you want to check on the form section that, hey, this is part of the contract. I see that from time to time where you'll have the full contract. It is part of the HOA, but the form wasn't checked on the contract. And so it really isn't an addendum to it if it wasn't checked that it was a part of it. So there's 2 parts in the main contract. There's one part that acknowledges, yes, it is part of a mandatory HOA. And then there's another one that says, and yes, we're going to use this form. So make sure that you have both of those checked. All right, I hope that helps. I will tell you, this is a highly litigious area, the HOA section. So if it's something that you feel like your buyer needs to talk with an attorney or something like that, hey, they should. That would be a great idea. Really, make sure that they're comfortable and confident going forward, because they're going to live among this HOA for their whole time in this property. And we want to make sure that they are really ready to go and understand what they're getting into. All right, I hope that helps. Thanks.